Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into another classic.
Always. What have we got today?
Today, it's 2001, A Space Odyssey. This film still gets people talking even after, 50 years? We're going to uncover 10 intriguing facts about it.
I love it. 2001 is a film that just keeps giving, isn't it?
Right. Some of these facts are about how the film predicted things we take for granted now. Others are more behind-the-scenes stuff, even a bit of rock and roll history. So let's jump right in. Fact number 1, the Stargate sequence. Visually, it's mind-blowing even today. How'd they do that back then?
Yeah, it's really something else. The technique is called slit scan photography. They basically filmed through this tiny opening in a piece of glass.
Ah, so that's how they got those swirling colors and, the warping effect.
Exactly. That's what makes it look like you're bending through space and time. It was groundbreaking, and it influenced so much sci-fi that came after. Even the warp speed in Star Trek was inspired by the Stargate sequence.
Wow. I did hear that back in the day, people would actually, take LSD before watching 2001, just to make the Stargate sequence even more intense.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I guess it's a testament to how powerful those visuals are, though I'm not sure Kubrick would have approved.
Probably not. But speaking of being ahead of its time, 2001 really predicted a lot of the technology we use today, didn't it?
Absolutely. Video calls, flat screen monitors, tablets, things we totally take for granted now.
And those in-flight entertainment systems, can you imagine flying without movies now?
Nope. But back in '68, that was a pretty wild idea.
And then there's HAL 9000. He's like the ultimate voice-activated computer, the grandfather of Siri and Alexa.
Totally. Makes you wonder what Kubrick would think if he could see how far we've come. Would he be surprised or like, yep, I told you so?
Right. Okay, fact number 3. HAL 9000, the ultimate villain. That calm voice, those chilling lines. But he almost looked completely different.
Oh, yeah. At first, they imagined him as this walking, talking robot.
Seriously, with arms and legs.
Yep. They even built a full-scale model of it. But they decided to go with the all-seeing eye design instead.
Which is way creepier, if you ask me.
Definitely adds to the menace. That design, by the way, was inspired by the Cyclops from the Odyssey. So there's that link to ancient myths about knowledge and power.
Okay, next up, music. I know the score is famous for those classical pieces, but Pink Floyd could have scored 2001.
They were approached, yeah, but it didn't work out. What's even crazier is that a composer named Alex North actually wrote an entire original score for the film.
Wait, seriously?
Totally. But Kubrick ended up scrapping it and using the classical music he'd always envisioned, and North didn't even know. He found out when he went to the premiere.
Ouch. That's gotta hurt.
Yeah, talk about a tough break. Luckily, North's rejected score was eventually released, so you can listen to 2001 with a completely different soundscape.
Interesting. Okay, on to the monolith.
Mm.
That giant black slab that pops up throughout the film. What is the deal with that thing?
Oh man, the monolith, it's a symbol of so much. Evolution, technology, the unknown. It's a catalyst, it pushes humanity forward, but it also raises these huge questions.
Like, who put it there? What does it want?
Exactly. And it's interesting, the monolith actually went through a lot of design changes during production.
What do you mean?
Kubrick started with a screen that showed instructions, then he tried a tetrahedron, even a cube, before finally settling on the simple black rectangle.
And that's what makes it so powerful, right? It's so simple, so minimalist. It becomes a blank slate for us to project our own hopes and fears onto.
You got it. It reflects our own anxieties about the future and maybe even our own potential. Now those apes in the Dawn of Man sequence, they look so real.
I know, right? You'd think they trained actual apes for the film.
Huh? No apes were harmed in the making of 2001, I assure you. They used human actors, mimes, and dancers, all dressed up in these incredible costumes and prosthetics.
So who was the genius behind those ape makeovers?
A guy named Stuart Freeborn. He's a legend in makeup design. He also designed Yoda for Star Wars, by the way.
Oh, wow, that's right. Okay, here's a fun fact for you. Comedian Ronnie Corbett, from the two Ronnies, was actually one of the models for the ape makeup.
Really? I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Yeah, it always makes me smile. Okay, now for a really haunting moment in the film, HAL singing Daisy Bell as he's being shut down. It's so sad, but it wasn't just a random song choice, was it?
Nope, there's a story behind that. Back in 1961, Arthur C. Clarke, who co-wrote the screenplay, he saw a demonstration of the IBM 794 computer singing Daisy Bell. It was one of the first examples of a computer generating music.
So that experience stuck with him.
It did, and it eventually made its way into the film. It connects HAL's decline to this real moment in technological history.
So it's not just a sad song. It's this reminder that even technology that seems super intelligent like HAL is still just a tool made by humans.
Exactly. Speaking of tools, Kubrick was obsessed with detail, especially when it came to depicting space realistically.
Oh, yeah, he was known for that.
Remember that scene where Bowman has to get back into the ship from outside? There's complete silence during that scene.
Oh, yeah, yeah. It's so eerie.
It's because there's no sound in the vacuum of space, and Kubrick insisted on getting that right. No sound effects at all.
Wow. Okay, now for fact number 9, and this is a big one, the ending. It's super ambiguous and everyone has their own interpretation of it. But didn't Kubrick actually explain what he meant by that whole Star Child transformation?
Yeah, he did. He said that Bowman is basically taken in by these godlike entities and put in a cosmic zoo.
A cosmic zoo.
Yeah. And they basically fast forward his entire life, then they transform him into this star child, this being of pure energy and intelligence, and they send him back to Earth.
Okay, that's a lot. So Bowman goes through this accelerated evolution, but what does it mean for humanity? What's the Star Child going to do? It's like Kubrick gave us answers that just create more questions.
That's Kubrick for you. And that's why 2001 is a film you can watch over and over and keep finding new things in it. Speaking of things you don't see in the film, did you ever notice that we never actually see the aliens responsible for the monoliths?
Now that you mention it,
Yeah.
we don't. I always figured it was a budget thing.
Nope. It was a deliberate choice. Kubrick actually wanted to show them at first.
He did.
Yeah, but Carl Sagan, the astronomer, talked him out of it. Sagan argued that any visual representation we could come up with would be too limited, too human.
I see.
He said it would be more powerful to just suggest their presence, let the audience imagine what they might be like. It's kind of like the film is saying, hey, the things that really blow our minds are the things we can't even begin to understand.
Yeah, those are the things that really stick with you, right? Okay, so we've talked about some of the bigger ideas in the film, but let's talk about the visuals for a minute. 2001 is visually stunning, but did you notice there's this recurring theme in the visuals?
Oh, yeah. You're talking about all the circular shapes?
Exactly. You see it everywhere. The revolving space station, the Discovery's cockpit, even HAL's eye is a circle.
Right, right. It's subtle, but it definitely reinforces the idea of cycles, right? Like humanity's journey through time and space. It's this never-ending cycle.
And maybe those circles are like a visual echo of the monolith's impact. It pushes us forward, but also brings us right back to these big questions about our existence.
I like that. It all ties together. And while we're on the subject of visuals, those zero-gravity scenes are still incredible to watch. How'd they pull that off back in the 60s?
I know, they look so real.
Kubrick was a master of practical effects. For those scenes, they built this giant rotating set, a 36-foot centrifuge. It was all to simulate artificial gravity.
Wow, that's commitment.
It was a huge undertaking, but it paid off.
Yeah.
Some of the most realistic space travel ever put on film.
I actually read somewhere that they used, get this, sticky tape for some of the special effects, like actual sticky tape.
You're not kidding. Remember that famous scene with the floating pen? That was done by sticking the pen to a piece of glass with double-sided tape and then moving the glass around.
No way. That's so ingenious.
It really is. Kubrick and his team were always finding creative ways to get those mind-blowing shots, even with the limited technology they had back then.
It's proof that sometimes the simplest solutions are the best. Okay, shifting gears a bit here. Let's talk about product placement. It's everywhere in movies these days. But 2001 was doing it way back in '68.
Kubrick was ahead of the curve on that one. He understood that to make the future believable, he needed to include brands people recognized.
So he got companies like IBM and Hamilton involved.
Yep, even Vogue magazine makes an appearance.
It's like saying even in the year 2001, people will still care about fashion and technology. Those things are constants.
Exactly. It grounds the future in something familiar. And speaking of familiar, that voice of HAL 9000, it's so chilling, so calm,
Yeah.
and so unsettling.
It's iconic. I always just assumed they hired the first voice actor they could find with a deep, soothing voice.
Haha. Nope, not quite. Kubrick was super picky about it. He actually went through quite a few actors before settling on Douglas Rain.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Who else did he consider?
Well, first he hired Nigel Davenport, but his English accent was too distracting. Then he tried Martin Balsam, but his voice was too, how did Kubrick put it, colloquially American.
So HAL could have a British accent or sounded like a New Yorker.
Right. He even thought about making HAL a woman at one point. He actually tested Stephanie Powers for the role.
Can you imagine? 2001 would have been a totally different film. So how did they finally land on Douglas Rain?
Kubrick was watching this documentary called Universe, and he was blown away by the narrator's voice. It turned out to be Douglas Rain. It's funny how these things happen sometimes.
Talk about a lucky break. I mean, for Rain, not so much for the other actors. Rain's performance is truly amazing, though. He conveys so much with just his voice. The intelligence, the calmness, and that underlying creepiness.
And get this, Rain recorded all his lines in post-production. He never even met Keir Dullea, who played Bowman.
That's wild. They never shared a scene together.
Nope. But they still created this intense dynamic between man and machine. It just shows you how talented they both were and how skilled Kubrick was as a director.
I did hear a story about how Rain prepared for the role. Something about recording his lines barefoot.
Yeah, that's a true story. During rehearsals, the assistant director was reading HAL's lines, but he had this thick Cockney accent. The actors couldn't understand half of what he was saying, so when it came time for Rain to record his lines, he took off his shoes and put his feet up on a pillow.
Huh. Why would he do that?
He thought it would soften his voice and make it sound more, well, machine-like. Less human.
That's brilliant. Maybe I should try that next time I have to leave a voicemail.
Huh. Might freak people out a bit. But it just shows you how dedicated Rain was to the role. Speaking of dedication, those prehistoric landscapes in the Dawn of Man sequence, how did they make those look so real back in 1968?
I know. It's like they had time travel or something.
Yeah. One of the key techniques they used was front projection. They basically projected images onto a giant screen behind the actors.
Oh, I see. So like a really early version of green screen?
Kinda. They used images of the Namibian desert. It created this incredible backdrop for the apes and the monolith.
Wow. So they brought the African savanna into the studio.
That's exactly what they did. It was a pretty revolutionary technique at the time, and it paved the way for all the CGI stuff we see today.
It's amazing how 2001 pushed the boundaries of filmmaking in so many ways. But sometimes the most powerful moments in the film come from these simple, elegant editing techniques.
You're thinking of that match cut, right? From the bone being tossed in the air to the orbiting nuclear weapon.
That's the one. It's such a jarring transition, but it's brilliant.
Mhm.
Millions of years of human evolution, all in a single cut.
And it really makes you think, right? That bone represents our first tools. The nuclear weapon. Well, that's the ultimate tool. The one that could destroy us all.
Yeah, it's a pretty powerful message about the potential of technology, both for good and bad. Kubrick was a master at getting us to think about the big picture. Okay, let's circle back to the ending for a minute. We talked about Kubrick's explanation of the Star Child, but what inspired that whole concept?
Well, Kubrick and Clarke were both fascinated by the idea of human evolution, both physical and spiritual. They drew inspiration from all sorts of sources, mythology, philosophy, even psychedelic experiences.
So they were into exploring expanded consciousness and all that.
Oh, yeah. They were really interested in the idea that humans could transcend their limitations and evolve into something more.
And the Star Child represents that.
Right.
It's like a glimpse into the next stage of human evolution, a step into the unknown.
It is. And the ambiguity of the ending is what makes it so powerful. It leaves us wondering, what does this transformation mean? What's next for humanity? It's a fitting end to a film that's all about challenging our perceptions and pushing the boundaries of imagination.
It's like Kubrick is saying, here's the path, but you got to figure out the destination for yourself. Okay, before we wrap up this deep dive into 2001, we have to talk about the science behind the film. It's one of the things that makes it so believable even all these years later.
Absolutely. Kubrick was obsessed with getting the science right. He consulted with a whole team of experts to make sure that the space travel, the technology, even the way the apes moved, that it was all as accurate as possible. It really makes the film feel immersive, doesn't it? Like you're right there with the astronauts.
It does. So who is this science guru Kubrick brought in?
His name was Frederick Ordway, a top space scientist and engineer. He and his team worked on everything from the spacecraft design to the technology. They even advised on how space travel should be depicted.
Wow, so they were really involved.
Absolutely. They were all about authenticity, even down to the tiniest details.
So when we see those amazing shots of the Earth rising over the moon, or the astronauts floating in zero gravity,
Yeah.
we can thank Ordway and his team for making it look so real.
You got it. And it wasn't just filmmakers who were impressed. The Apollo 8 astronauts, the first humans to orbit the moon, they actually watched 2001 right before their mission.
Seriously.
Yep. And they were blown away by how accurate it was. It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. The film came out a year before we even landed on the moon.
That's incredible. It's like Kubrick gave them a sneak peek of what they were about to experience. Didn't Kubrick also work with Carl Sagan, the astronomer?
He did. Sagan was really influential, especially when it came to how they handled the aliens in the film. We talked about this earlier, but it's worth repeating because it's such a fascinating choice.
Yeah, I'm still curious about why we never actually see the aliens.
Sagan argued that any attempt to show them would be too limited, too bound by our human perspective.
Makes sense. We can't even imagine what alien life might actually look like.
Exactly. Sagan believed it was more powerful to just hint at their presence, let the audience fill in the blanks.
And Kubrick, being the master of visual storytelling that he was, took that advice and ran with it.
He did, and it's one of the things that makes the film so enduring. Those unseen aliens become this force we can only try to grasp. It's like the film is acknowledging the vastness of the universe and the limits of our own understanding.
It's like those things we can't quite wrap our heads around are often the most awe-inspiring, which I guess is what 2001 is all about, right? It's about humanity's journey, our evolution, and our place in this massive, mysterious cosmos.
That's it. 2001 challenges us to think beyond ourselves, to consider the possibility of intelligences far greater than our own. It asks us to think about the future of our species. And those are questions that are still relevant today, maybe even more so now than they were back in 1968.
I think that's what makes it a true classic. It's a film that keeps you thinking long after the credits roll. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground in our deep dive into 2001, A Space Odyssey. From its groundbreaking special effects to its scientific accuracy and mind-bending themes, it's a film that continues to inspire and challenge audiences decades after its release. A true masterpiece of cinema, as they say.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And to all our listeners out there, I highly recommend revisiting 2001, A Space Odyssey, with all these new insights in mind. You might be surprised by what you discover. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep looking up at the stars with a sense of wonder. And remember, the universe is a vast and mysterious place, and there's always something new to discover.